And hi everyone, welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I'm Riggs Zanitti, and I'm joined today by my good friend, Dr. Susan Nash. How are you, Susan?
I'm great, and I'm glad to be here. We have a great guest.
I'm glad you could make it, and we've got Dr. Larry Davis with us again, another great guest. It's been good. It's been good. No complaints. We're doing great. Susan, you always get the best people. Here we go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com, your training and video partner.
Hello, I'm Peter Baker. Please visit voiceovermasterclass.com to see details of the training courses I have on offer for new and existing voice talents to further their career by enhancing voice and technical skills, as well as essential marketing tips.
Peter is a great guy. We all sound like him afterwards. We can practice our British accents. Today we've got Dr. Larry Davis. How are you, Larry?
I'm very good. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, I'm so glad you came to join us. You know, we've been joking a little bit about it, but we've got a serious topic on hand that's affecting pretty much all of us around the world in one way or another. If not fear, it's misinformation or whatever else. But the COVID-19, the coronavirus that's out there right now and causing all sorts of grief. From an economics point of view, I can imagine this is going to ripple pretty heavily. But today the stock market dropped 1% here in the States. It was a big sellout. I don't know what the final number was. It was about 251 down earlier, and I think it was still going down. They said it was plunging. Which 1% is not terrible, but it's a big number, and so that's one thing. And they said it was mostly fears of the virus because of some of the news going out there. Hotels are affected, cruise lines are affected, airlines are affected, and big time. I think American last week asked staff to take voluntary furloughs because they can't afford to pay them full salaries with over 10,000 flights canceled. It's a nasty situation. Susan, you were talking about this last week from your perspective. What do you think right now?
Oh, it's just getting worse, and the supply chain is popping up in blocks in surprising places. For example, many companies and countries are predicting pharmaceutical shortages because of the inputs. I mean, there are, for example, hard shells for capsules are manufactured, capsugels are manufactured, like delivery systems for the product. That's just one example of millions.
Yeah. Larry, you, as an economist, you've seen these kind of issues before. One thing that comes to mind is we haven't learned anything from the past. We have a single source right now, pretty much worldwide, for manufacturing. There aren't a lot of other sources. There are, you've got India and some other places, but they're small compared to what is in China. And companies are now talking in the U.S. about starting other manufacturing plants here again, because they're realizing a one-source solution is never really that good a one. What do you think?
Well, there are a lot of flexibilities there. There's so many fingers to this virus situation. We could go in 16 directions and talk all night about it. I was looking at the situation related to the employees in China who are manufacturing those component parts that are sent to this country that we need. And they apparently live in fringe areas, and there's transportation into their work, and the transportation they can afford has been canceled, and the option is the high-speed rail, and they can't afford that, so they can't get to the jobs, and that's causing a situation in the supply chain. Things can't get to this country. Now, we tend to be flexible sometime, and one of the concerns over the years is that we've been giving up jobs to foreign countries and to cheaper labor. But we've got the ability to switch back to that, but there would be a learning curve, and it would take time to do that. And the labor cost would be considerably higher, and that would cause prices of finished products to increase. And therefore, in general, I think we expect an inflation problem.
Which brings its own fun little solutions. I lived in hyperinflation for 3 years. I lived down in Argentina during the late 70s. It was really fun. The hyperinflation was bad. When I got back to the U.S., we were at almost 20% inflation back then. That was around 1979, 80. And I'm surprised we didn't have riots in the street, but we didn't take inflation well at 20%. In Argentina, 1,000 was like, yeah, it's no big deal. It's just a very different mindset. But what do you think would happen in case of inflation right now? Because we're not used to inflation anymore.
Well, if with inflation, that means prices increase. And there are a lot of families and individuals in this country who are living just to get by. They work to just pay the bills. There's nothing extra. And when prices are increasing, they're going to have to sacrifice some things that they would ordinarily be purchasing for consumption. And, what do you sacrifice? I mean, you hear about the cost of the cost of medical services and prescriptions, and people sometimes have to make the decisions: do we want to eat or take our high blood pressure medication? And I think that would be accentuated as this thing continues, if it continues to get worse.
Yeah, that kind of brings up another thing, that even though, quote unquote, like they were talking recently, our economy is better than it's been in a very long time, I don't think the middle class is feeling it as well as others. I still think we're getting squeezed in the middle class a lot more. We've been squeezed for a long time, but I don't think it's really gone down that much. Things have gotten more expensive. There are higher costs. Medical costs are definitely not any cheaper than they've been. It's still expensive. What effects do you think this particular coronavirus, if it does, there's the pandemic fear mongers who keep saying, oh yeah, we're all going to die and this is the end of it all. Yeah, the reality is, so far, it's been kept pretty isolated and not too many cases, at least so far. The worst case outside of China is on that cruise ship in Yokohama. I don't know if that's a Princess cruise ship. I can't remember what line it was. But they've already got, I think, 600 to 800 people infected out of about 5,000. So we're at a pretty high percentage. And they're not letting them get off that ship because there's so much of it.
They let some of them off.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, they've let some off. And I think that, in fact, weren't some of them that were infected allowed back into the U.S., but they're going into quarantine.
Right.
I think that the idea was that they would potentially all get sick at the same time and potentially all clear up at the same time. But dominoes don't fall that way. And I think in a very Machiavellian sense, they kind of said, okay, we can actually study the patients and give them the best of care, in theory. And then also they're finding that the antibodies in the plasma of the people who've recovered can be used successfully to treat others and make medicine. So maybe they could harvest the healthy ones that recovered on the Yokohama, on the cruise ship, before they let them go.
Has anyone died on that ship?
No.
I'm not sure, but an interesting point related to that, when they were allowing those people off the ship to fly back home to the USA, some chose not to do that because they thought the danger of being on a contaminated, air-contaminated airplane with some people who may be infected. They chose not to fly. They chose to stay on the ship.
Yeah.
Now they said
they were one day away from getting free. So they said, why would we risk one day? We're free for one day. We show we're clean, we're gone. And then if we go on the plane, we run the risk of resetting this whole thing.
Of course, I think we talked about this a little last week, but there's a little bit of a myth about planes and infections. Planes actually don't really spread that many infections because, one, the climate is exceedingly dry. On a plane, it's about 4% humidity, which doesn't really lead much. They said the worst part is if you're next to somebody, either next to maybe a row or two in front, a row or two behind, maybe there's a slight chance that you could get a cold or flu or something, but it's rare, partly because it just doesn't do that well. Now, again, it depends on what strain of virus, what strain of flu, whatever it is. And there's a lot of reports that this may be a bioengineered thing that got loose. No one knows. I mean, there's a lot of information going all over the place. So no one knows what the truth really is. But the thing is...
The infodemia.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. Larry, from an economics perspective, what we've seen so far, I think we're seeing more fear than, at least as far as the regular population, but people, companies like Apple, they send out about 1 million, they sell about 1 million iPhones a week. That's a lot of iPhones, and they haven't supposedly received iPhones in at least 2 to 3 weeks. That's a big hit on their bottom line. Now, mind you, Apple marks up like crazy. So, when we talk about cheap labor, they get it 4 times over because they do mark up a lot. But still, that's a huge amount of loss for them in terms of catch-up sales. People may go other vendors, they may do other things. And they said they were trying to get back up to speed, but they weren't moving quickly. That was Foxconn. They were having problems getting people to produce at normal rates. So they didn't really go into detail why or what's going on. But that's just one company. There's a whole mess of other companies. And like Susan said, with something simple like the medical tablets, the packaging, soft shells, hard shells. What else do you think is going on?
It's several avenues to look at. I mean, with Apple, they had the New Year holiday in China that they had, Susan?
Yes.
Yes, a Lunar New Year. Yeah.
See, they generally shut down for 2 weeks related to that, and then what happened, that interrupted some of the production and shipping. And the other point with this virus coming along, they add to that kind of compounds the problem.
Yeah.
And if they're not getting component parts in here for the iPhones or the iPads or the Androids, that's going to cause a backlog of demand. Of course, a lot of times in the sales of these phones, they're upgrades, so people may just have to defer upgrading for a while and keeping what they have and to see what happens. The price is probably going to be going upward. Sometimes companies use any excuse that they can to increase prices, and I see no alternative than the people selling the iPhones and the other types of electronics are raising prices.
And that's pretty much everything. TVs, everything's being affected.
Oh yeah,
much.
Yes.
There's a large component reseller, but it's like a Best Buy. It's called Fry's Electronics. They're mostly West Coast. They may have some other branches around, but not a lot. They were about 2 months ago. This isn't before the virus. They had some vendor issues, and their stores were empty. You couldn't find parts. A lot of people go there to build computers. That's what we used to use them for. We would build a lot of our own media computers, and they were great. We went in, it's like, what happened? The locusts have hit this place. No parts. And they said, we can't get parts from China. And a lot of that had to do with a question I wanted to ask you today, which is tariffs. We've got viruses. We've got major economic issues happening with our supply chain. And we've got tariffs. What do you think of tariffs and their true effect on not only the one we're punishing, but ourselves?
Well, I mean, bottom line is inflationary. Given the circumstances that are happening, I mentioned earlier that I see no alternative than we're going to have higher inflation. Yeah. And when you add tariffs, that's just adding to the price of things, and that increases the price also. So people will be paying more. And in the fundamental of economics, you've got so much income, a family or an individual has so much income, and if they're paying higher prices for whatever thing, they're going to have to sacrifice something else. And of course, those will be individual choices. An interesting observation here, though, in the town where I live, population 100,000, 150,000, somewhere in between there. It does not seem to be affected. They have car lots, new car lots, dealerships all over the place, and they're just selling like crazy. But the other thing that I noticed, we have more than our share of restaurants, and they have a new one here in town that's been open for 2 weeks. We tried to go there Saturday night. It's still so crowded you can't even get in. We moved over to the restaurant, adjacent to it. It was crowded too. Parking lots are full, so people are not suffering too much. I mean, it would be cheaper
Right.
to cook something at home and have a family meal, I suppose. But everybody seems to be continuing to go out to eat.
But it hasn't really trickled yet to everyone. I mean, really, to none of us. I don't think any of us are feeling it directly. I know people in the airline industry are feeling it. I know some people in the airlines, and the flights are canceled. If they've got Asian routes, they're not flying, a lot of them. So that's one thing. And airlines already,
Well,
yeah.
yes, and then I'll say one area that people are feeling it already is in the energy industry. LNG, liquid natural gas, that was supposed to be the salvation of, say, where Larry is in the Haynesville shale produces a lot of natural gas. And so some new LNG terminals were built with mainly private equity funding. It's in enormous levels of debt, but huge capital investment. It finally went online this year, the LNG terminal, to go to China. And then this happens, and now there's an oversupply of natural gas, liquid natural gas. They don't even know where to stack up all of the shipments. And then on top of that, the government of China is declaring force majeure and saying that they're invoking the force majeure clause. So I was looking at yesterday I was looking at a legal opinion on that by one of the, I guess it was a court, and they were circuit court, and they were clearly looking at it. Really depends on the actual phrasing in each contract. So that's going to be very interesting. You'll probably see more Chinese companies invoking force majeure just to try to preserve their cash flow. And then, of course, that means that you don't get paid here.
Right.
And those companies that were counting on that cash flow, who are leveraged up to the gills, are going to start feeling it very quickly.
Well, one company that right now looks like they may be in critical trouble. They've been there before in the last 40, 50 years. But this one could be pretty major, and that's Boeing. Boeing is our only really large airline maker or airplane manufacturer right now. Airbus is kicking its behind really well. They're making better planes, less problems. The 737 MAX has been a disaster because it was handled wrong from the beginning. And now they've got problems with the 77X, which is the new 777 large wide-body plane, which has had two major problems in testing. Broken fuselage in the middle, major crack on takeoff, and exploding cargo doors. Remember the DC-10? Here we go again. And the problem there is that with all the money they've lost, they've already lost a possible $50 billion on 737 MAXs they can't deliver. They've stopped production. They had that many orders, and companies are canceling all over the world. And then they're not buying 777s that much anymore. Now they're worried about the new ones. They've got a lot of debt, or they're getting into more debt, and they have a lot of internal problems. Boeing's a huge company, and I wonder.
Yeah,
and with the virus now,
that's a
they
good
can't
example.
even get other things going. They can't deliver planes to certain places. So,
Well, and there are a lot of strategic implications. Let's think about that, because like Boeing has a military line and a huge factory in Oklahoma City near Tinker Air Force Base.
thousands of sub-vendors. Yeah.
They can't afford to have Boeing go under. That's a strategic element.
So, Larry, is it all doom and gloom, or? Oh,
Well, it is. It depends on the industry that you're in.
Yeah.
It's going to be rough. I was thinking as y'all were talking about the effects in the energy industry. There seems to be a windfall or a benefit to consumers. I've seen the price of gasoline drop recently, and that's probably related to supply and demand. The airlines are not buying the fuel as they were. And I was reading a thing I've learned a lot about China in reading recently. They say they have a lot of wealthy people and a lot of cars. And they said there are virtually no cars on the road now, so therefore they're not buying gasoline. So
Interesting.
I guess the supply is exceeding demand for a while and helping consumers. The another avenue, I didn't know that there were so many wealthy people in China and they like to travel. They mentioned a couple of countries they like to go to for recreation. One was France, and it was talking about how they're suffering now because their hotel rooms are not selling, and the things that the tourists typically are purchasing are not selling. So it's pretty widespread, not just for China or the U.S., but many other countries also.
Well, yeah, especially since in the airline industry, a lot of the flights one takes to Asia, for example, they're coming from South America, from Australia, from Africa, from Europe. So if those flights are getting canceled, it's causing a massive amount of redirecting of flights, trying to get, and a lot of flights, I think I was reading somewhere, some airlines are just putting airplanes in the desert storage areas until they can get them back running again because they don't have enough room at the airports to hold them. They're not flying anywhere. So that's a bad one.
Yeah, that's
well
an
on the
picture.
positive side. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, that's an interesting picture from the air to see all those airplanes out in the desert.
That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, in Tucson.
They've got it in Tucson.
Well,
they've got it in the Death Valley area. Yeah.
Okay, so I just had a bright. I will say that this is a good time if you're creative. This is I was watching a video yesterday about if you can't get an N95 mask that filters out all the particles and bacteria and stuff, virus, you can get your air filter from your house. With the accordion ones, 3M.
Oh yeah,
and you
yeah.
can take off the collar and pull it apart. You can make your own masks.
But you know what's funny about the N95? They make people faint. Unless you know how to use it, it really cuts your airflow. And not everybody can handle it. Like old people, if they start taking N95s, it's like, boom, gone. It's like not a good thing. We've done a lot of safety training, and we've worked with first responders and stuff. And N95s are great, but it's amazing how many people have problems with them. So everybody's rushing to get N95s. Wait till they put them on, and they go, "Oh, I don't feel too good." They're kind of
well,
nasty.
apparently a lot of the ones that you've purchased anymore, there's a lot of like counterfeiting too. Things.
Susan, when you take your air conditioner filter out at home and make your personal mask, I want to be the first to see it. You might be careful about talking about this. You might be able to get a patent and reap the benefits of that.
Well, you know what's funny
Yeah,
too
I started watching prepper channels.
You know what's funny about the virus too is that it really doesn't affect everyone. It affects a lot of younger, a lot of older, not too much in between, though it can. And they said if you have a pretty good immune system, chances are nothing would happen. But you know, there's also a chance that if you don't, this one hits you hard because the symptoms are immediately pneumonia. You're not going through flus, you're getting pneumonias, and that's why it's had such a pretty high death rate. And pneumonias are nasty.
They say that you can get it again, and the second time you get it, your body goes into a cytokine storm.
Huh. Interesting.
So your immune system goes crazy and overattacks and kills you.
Yeah, they said you literally see lacerations on the lungs from the people who've died. It's pretty. When it hits you and you can't fight it, yeah, it's pretty rough. It's definitely not a nice way to go, and it go fast. You know, once they get the infection, like within 3-4 days, some of them are going. So it's definitely not a good one, but.
We've been diverted by this coronavirus. I mean, the usual type A and type B flu in this country. There are many people being affected by that, and more people dying this year than in the past, I'm understanding. So that's a pretty significant, impactful thing that's going on also that we don't even talk about.
Yeah, that's true. See, in the old days in California, none of us died because we were used to smog. So you could fight anything off after smog. But nowadays our air is a little bit cleaner, so I don't know. It'll be interesting. So where do you think we're going with this? How long do you think this is going to last? Right now it's all over the news. Do you think we're going to have months of this, years, or are they going to immediately? Supposedly somebody's found a cure, and they said they can make the cure pretty quickly, and within like a month or two they can have it out there. I forgot what article that was, but they said it's not that hard a cure or hard to find it. So it's not sure how quickly they can bring this one down. What do you think, Larry?
The thing I worry about related to that, I mean, a quick fix, quick antidote for this, and it hasn't been tested. Now, what become the side effects, and what are the catastrophic things that might be on the horizon related to the antidote that they're hoping to present? How long will this thing last?
The woman that's oh, sorry. Excuse me, I didn't mean to step on you.
How long will this thing last? I mean, I don't know. How accurate is the information we're getting out of China? There's been some discussion that maybe it's not accurate, maybe it is accurate, but is the situation there much more serious than they're telling the world? I think the ultimate impact and how long it's going to last is going to depend on how quickly they get that under control and their country and.
They're panicking over there. I think they realize they're getting hit harder than anybody because if we don't buy or we can't buy, they die. Because without the U.S., we're the biggest buyer of all, period. They don't have a chance, and I think they know it. So I think that there's panic probably all the way around. Tariffs aren't helping anybody, but that's another issue. I don't dislike Trump, but I don't like tariffs. I've lived through tariffs overseas before, and they just don't work. Everybody gets punished, and we get punished too by the tariffs because everything's more expensive, and you have layoffs and other problems with that. So not sure that was a smart economic move for us. I know what he was trying to do to kind of get China back into negotiations, but it's a double-edged sword. It hits both sides.
Absolutely.
I have to say that I really admire the heroism of the Chinese medical professionals. I have I work with people in China, and I got a message yesterday and the day before on WeChat, and one of my colleagues is in China, and his sister is a nurse, and she was involved in the SARS outbreak, and she stayed in Beijing, but one of her colleagues was in charge of constructing one of the mobile new hospitals. And it's just all out. And it's really, really hard on the medical professionals. And they're trying to get people from all over the country to go to Wuhan. But then that's leaving a shortage of supplies and everything all over the country. And my heart goes out, and I think that it's time for us, to have a moment of appreciation and solidarity with the people that are sacrificing. And I understand that government gets criticized a lot for this, but they're doing everything they can, all they know how to do.
A moment of silence.
It's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, the uncharted territory and so many unknowns out there. And in a sense, if you think about it, it could get pretty scary. I think maybe a lot of people don't worry about thinking about it because it's not directly affecting them. Right. It's just a bypassing thing on the news. We in academia, we tend to do more research and dig a little deeper into it and find the details about it. And maybe carry a little more concern than the general population would.
Well, this is also going to affect globalism. Globalism
absolutely.
is not necessarily the best idea that ever came around, and it's always been one-sided in many cases. This is a little bit of a wake-up call to globalism with no real thought to backup systems or distributed manufacturing or anything else. So I think this, like I said, wake-up call. I think we're going to start thinking a little bit more about, are the prices really that much cheaper? Not always. And can we really afford that, as in all societies, to just depend on one or two or three manufacturers and then nobody else does anything? That's going to be tough.
Yeah. And then also, okay. Well, I was just going to say what happened. Oh, sorry.
Larry?
Tag, you're it.
Go ahead.
Go.
We keep talking about the electronics and the pharmaceutical impact, but I mean there are other industries significantly impact. There are a lot of tires on automobiles in this country that come from China, and people drive their automobiles, have their blowouts, and wear out the tires, and need to buy new tires. And I think the supply of tires that are being purchased in this country and other countries too could be significantly affected. Which the bottom line is, that turns out that, when you go buy some tires and the supply is limited, prices are going to go up.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't think about stuff like that until it hits them, and then they go, what happened?
Yeah.
And it doesn't help us when it overwhelms our system, when it gets here, and if it overwhelms our medical system, or like what is it going to do to the homeless? I mean, how does flu affect the homeless? What is, a lot of unknowns.
That's a good question. I mean, how would it affect them?
Probably
they're already
not.
affected. Can they be affected more? Probably not a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they're a mess as it is, half of them. You should see our tent cities in L.A. It's just awful. They're just adding more squalor to it. I think that's really what it is. But there's so many. The homeless issue is a whole other issue. That's just a whole other issue. And it hasn't been handled well by just about anybody, at least not in California, among others. But it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Well, we are. We are.
Those 10 cities were making the.
Go ahead, Larry.
Those 10 cities were making the news today. They were talking about that and said the scrambling. They're trying to get small mobile homes to get them into those. Yeah. I don't know how much that improves things.
It doesn't, because the endemic problem of a lot of homeless people is mental illness, addiction, a whole mess of problems. And they don't talk about that. They're just trying to say, well, they chose to be homeless. Oh, yeah, really? Maybe some, but a lot of them are mental. I've read estimates of 50 to 75% have mental illness. Remember, we emptied out our hospitals in California back during Reagan time. And you just go, okay. Yeah. So patients, the people have a right to be homeless, according to some of our people here. And it's just like, okay, maybe, but really, I mean, a lot of them have no choice. And they have a lot of addictions and everything else that don't let them not be homeless. And, some people are trying to address that, but others are trying to paint a different picture, which isn't real. And that's a whole other issue we should talk about one day.
Well, we who live in comfortable houses probably can't relate to that. I mean, a number of years ago, there was a project where there was a group that wanted to move forward and do something for the homeless, and they built housing for them and moved them into it. And the first thing that they did, they knocked out the windows because they liked the open air.
Yep. Yeah. So, it's a problem.
We need a culture. In our culture, we're so individualistic. And we're rather than collectivistic, and if someone in your family has a mental illness, you think, well, it's on them; it doesn't reflect on me. Whereas in other cultures, it's really shameful, so they do whatever they can to take care of that person, even if it means.
Or in some cultures, they hide it.
Right.
So there's that issue too.
I was watching a comedian. I mean, he was getting some laughs, but the other point, he said, everybody's got mental illness in their family. He said, what you do? He said, you don't bring them out. He said, you keep them locked in the back room, take them their food.
That's right. That's what addicts were for in the old days.
Right.
Sad. But anyway, yep. Well, we are out of time. And Larry, as always, we appreciate you coming out and sharing with us. And Susan, I think we're going to have some more talks about this, I think, because we're not over yet. I think we still got a way
No.
to go. And the end result economically of this, we don't know. We just don't know at
We
this
don't.
point. But it's already hurting a lot of people. The news isn't talking much about how much it's hurting economically. They're just kind of gleaning over a little bit because
They're
nobody.
afraid to.
They're afraid
They're already
to.
calling it Black Swan.
Mm-hmm.
Black Swan 2020.
Yeah.
Well, I saw that the GDP for this country, the USA, is going to drop a whole percentage point in 1 quarter.
And we've only been
And,
about
that-
3% period, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's pretty significant. When they're not
So we took
producing,
two
that
steps
means
forward and
people-
one back, basically.
Yeah. When they're not producing, that means people, because they can't get the component parts or whatever, they don't need the employees. They get to sit home.
Yeah.
Deal with the impact of that.
Yeah, it's a little scary. Anyway, for all those watching, please subscribe. Let us know what you think. If you want to get a hold of anybody, information below on how to contact people, and we'll see you next week. Again, Larry, thanks for coming on. Susan, as always, a pleasure. Have a good one.
Thank you.